Well, dear brothers and sisters, here we are again, another Poland conference, but this time under completely different circumstances. Last year, when we had the Parents' Conference and the Young People's Conference in Małyszyca, Poland, we never imagined that this time we would need to do this conference by Zoom or by the internet. How we thank the Lord for over 25 years. We've been gathering there in Poland, and the Lord has been so faithful to meet us year after year. And last year and the year before that, we really began to focus a lot of our attention on the parents. In fact, beginning around 2014, we began to have special meetings for the parents and serving ones. But our main focus has been on the children and the young people, mainly the children's work and the young people's work. And I believe, to my feeling, some of those sessions were really the best to describe and define how our brother Lee had been leading us for so many years to carry out the work with the children and the young people. You know, we're very burdened that the Lord could raise up a next generation for his interest and for his move on the earth. And so we're very burdened for this. We've been so burdened for many years. And you know, this has been something very much in my heart and in my burden. But this last year in particular, when we were together, there was this strong feeling rising up within me and within my brother Simpson Chen that we really need to focus on the parents. That while, you know, to be honest with you, it has been nearly heartbreaking over the years in our raising up young people in Europe. We saw so many. They came to the conference. They were revived. They were enlivened. They made fresh consecrations to the Lord. We saw them. We wept with them. Even we baptized so many. But then in the years following those transactions that they had with the Lord, many of them drifted away and they did not become useful to the Lord for his recovery, for his move. Now, we believe that God is sovereign. We believe that he heard every prayer. He honors every consecration, and he will never forget. Just like we will never forget. Yet we're so burdened for so many of our young generation. It seems that after they have such an experience in Poland, they almost have no way to go on. And so we began to adjust our concern and our focus to the parents and the family life and the church life, that this is the secret, the key to raising up our next generation is not in conferences and in young people's meetings, although those are very important. We realize that the real secret, the real key, is that the Lord could raise up second generation God-men, some that were raised up in homes of the saints, saints who lived as patterns. Moms and dads lived in a certain way toward a certain purpose. And this left such a deep impression that affected and influenced their next generation. You know, recently, I've also been preparing some messages for the Young People's Conference in Poland, which we will have meetings in May and June, and most of them will be in July and August. But one of the messages that I've been reading, and I'd like to direct you to this, it's in the Collected Works of Witness Lee, 1958. They were previously published in a book called Men Who Turn the Age. And that's the topic of our conference with the young people this summer, is the Men Who Turn the Age. Well, that book was published many years ago with 2 chapters. But when the Collected Works came out, 1958, I forget the volume. Maybe there's only one, probably not. There's 3 chapters to that book. And so there was a 3rd chapter added in. Actually, it's the 1st chapter, and it speaks about the Lord's need for the men to turn the age, or young men to turn the age. But the burden there is about the mother of Samuel, and how it was the mother's consecration that started the whole process. You know the story. There's this couple, very godly, proper couple, Elkanah and his dear, loving wife, Hannah. And they lived together, and Hannah was barren, was unable to bear children. It says in Samuel that God shut up her womb. Hard to understand that, but God did that. And probably, there's no scripture to tell us this. There's not much in the word that describes this. But Elkanah had a second wife named Peninnah. And probably because Hannah was barren and Elkanah needed children to pass on his land and his inheritance to. So he took a second wife. And the second wife began to have children. And the Bible refers to her as Hannah's rival. Now look at the situation. Here is a woman who loves her husband, wants to have a child in the worst way, wants to bear children, but is barren. And it was God who closed up her womb. And then a rival comes along, the wife of her husband, and she begins to have children. And so she's proud. She's probably uses that to torment Hannah and to cause her to become so bitter in her soul. I don't mean bitter in a bad way, but just in bitterness of soul and a real suffering. And year after year, they would go to Jerusalem for the feast. And while they were at the feast, no doubt Elkanah is there with his wife and his two wives, and Hannah is standing there, and Peninnah is there with all of her children. And the people are greeting Elkanah and saying, "My, your children are growing up, and look how many you have and how the Lord has blessed you." And Hannah is just miserable, year after year, year after year. I've often thought about this, and I thought, my, Hannah, she must have prayed. She must have prayed, "Lord, please open my womb. I'm such a failure. I'm so cursed. I'm so nothing. I cannot have a child. I love my husband. I would like to produce seed for him. Please have mercy on me. Give me a child." And you know, probably over time, her prayer changed. Her prayer improved. The answer was no. No answer. Not just no answer. We've had this experience. Sometimes we prayed for things for years and years, and it seems like the heavens are sealed. There's no response. It's not even like no, it's just nothing. And so she prays again and again. And I imagined, now again, this is just my imagination, so forgive me. I imagined that her prayer probably improved a little bit. And so she began to pray, "Lord, do it for my husband. Do it for Elkanah. Give Elkanah a child. I'm here, I'm open, I'm willing, I'm here to give you a way. I consecrate myself again. I deal with my sin. I deal with the flesh. Please, do it for my husband." So you could say that's a real improvement. It's not for me. Whether you do it for me or not, it's okay. But do it for my husband. You know, you can imagine her prayer improving that way. Still nothing. But through this process, she really entered into God's heart and God's need. And she gave God the top cooperation. Well, one year it came time for them to go to the temple, again for one of the feasts. She goes up there. Those times are the most miserable times. And there she is, and she just can't bear it. The feasting, the happiness, the joy, she has no part of that. And so instead, she goes to the tabernacle, the temple of God, to pray. And there she is standing in the outer court, and she's just pouring out her soul to Jehovah. And I'm sure that on this occasion, something of the Lord's heart was infused into her. And as she was praying, she touched not only her need, not only her husband's need, but she touched Jehovah's need. Now, I'd like to make a point here that oftentimes our need, our lack, the cry, the bitter cry from deep within us is not just us, it's the Lord within us. And at that moment, in her pouring out prayer, she prayed, Lord, if you give me a son, he will be a Nazirite to you every day, all his life. I will give him to you. He will be lent to Jehovah. And so, sorry, I'm taking a lot of time on this because I feel that this part of this example is so good. It's almost like she said, Lord, I have this need. Elkanah has this need. And Jehovah may have left an impression. I also have a need, Hannah. I have a need. And she might say, Lord, you know, I'm such a failure. As a human, as a woman, as a wife, I'm cursed. I'm such a failure. I'm so weak. I'm so poor. And again, the Lord maybe would comment, Hannah, I'm poor too. I'm poor too. Do you know the priesthood? The situation with the priesthood is so waning, so poor. I need a Nazirite, Hannah. I need a Nazirite. So Hannah, she struck the deal. She made the deal. She said, okay, Lord, you give me a child. You give me a son, and I'll give you a Nazirite. Wow, you could almost hear the age changing as she was in bitterness of soul, pouring out her heart to Jehovah, making an absolute consecration to the Lord. You give me a child, I'll give you a Nazirite. So, Eli is there. He's the high priest, and he's watching her. And in his dullness and his lack of proper discernment, thinks that she's drunk. And he begins to rebuke her for being drunk so early in the day. And she says, oh, I'm not drunk. I'm pouring out my soul to Jehovah. Her lips were moving, but no sound was coming out. Have you prayed like that? I'm sure you have. And then he said, may God grant you your prayer, your request. So after the feast, she goes back, and guess what? She becomes pregnant, and she delivers a son. She names him Samuel. And for the next few years, while Samuel is in her heart, in her care, in her house, she's weaning him. She's preparing to hand him over. Now, Eli was not the greatest dad. In fact, the Lord rebuked him because he did not deal with his sons in a proper way, and his sons were defiling the priesthood. And so Hannah may have observed this. She may have been disgusted by this. Yet after 3, 4, 5 years, we don't know, but after she weaned Samuel, she brought him and she handed him over to fulfill her consecration, her vow to the Lord. I think any one of us, seeing that man, seeing those sons, would have thought, there's no way I'm giving my precious child to them, for them to raise. But you know what? She fulfilled her prayer, her consecration, her vow to the Lord. She gave her child to the Lord. And then Samuel was raised in the house of God, and from an early age, he learned how to minister to Jehovah in a linen ephod. He just learned in the house of God to serve God. Well, what we see here in Samuel is not only the mother's consecration, but at some point, her consecration became his consecration. He stepped into his mother's absoluteness. He followed in her vow. She made the vow. He fulfilled the vow. It's amazing to me. 2 generations blended together, serving together, functioning together. 2 levels of consecration. A mother, her family, the older generation, and the younger generation stepping into that consecration seamlessly, without struggle, just carrying on that family's consecration. Here you see 2 levels of consecration. To me, this is beautiful. This is absolutely beautiful.